Our first last week we heard from one of the candidates in our school board election, Ariana Martinez, and tonight we're going to hear from another candidate, Dr. Ali Mansouri, and I hope I pronounced your name right, Ali.
Yes.
Ali has been a Benicia resident for about 10 years, and he has two school-age daughters. He immigrated to the United States when he was 8, and he graduated from UC Berkeley with a PhD in nuclear engineering, among other things. He worked for various departments of energy and the defense programs. He went back to school for pre-med, and he accepted a health professions scholarship by the Air Force in exchange for a service commitment. Dr. Mansouri worked as a medical director for Medi-Cal, serving 370,000 members, including 170,000 children. Currently, he works as a hospital medical physician at Kaiser. He's done volunteer work for Habitat for Humanity, the Creative Learning Center, a daycare program for mentally ill adults, a news writer for KPFA, and he volunteered for California Prop 186 for single-payer healthcare. I've asked him to tell us why he's running and his goal for the district. There will be time for questions afterwards, so I've hope to give him around 5 minutes or so, and then another 5 minutes for questions. So please put your questions in the chat. And without further ado, Dr. Mansouri. Mansouri?
Mansouri is fine. No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that nice. Thank you, and I'm humbled by the introduction. Thank you. Let me say thank you all for joining tonight, and I'm very honored and happy to be here. I'm coming to you from New York City. I apologize for my unshaven face. I thought I brought a razor and it wasn't there, so I'm a little too chicken to run into the streets of Manhattan this time of night and get a razor. So please forgive me for that. So let me say why I'm running. Let me start by saying I know there were some issues in November surrounding the election where no one was a candidate. Let me just say that I was neither involved in the appointment process or the recall process. I arrived at this point in my life organically. I had some concerns with my daughter last semester. She's a Benicia High School student. I don't like to share too many details, and I hope you keep some of this please don't advertise this, because I want to keep my daughter's privacy as much as I can. But she had a course load that was too difficult, a little bit more than what we anticipated. One of the classes was advertised as requiring a certain amount of work, and it turned out to be way more, and it was overwhelming her. I reached out to the counselor 5 weeks in the school session and said, hey, this is too much. Can we drop her into the lower level classes? She was taking 3 AP classes. I thought, she's always been a straight A student. I said, can we do this? I said, I just noticed her mental health and stability is going down. It wasn't received very seriously, in my opinion. And I kept calling and asking multiple times. And it got down about 12 weeks later. I had to just reach out to Dr. Ovick, who I believe he didn't say what he did exactly, but I think he intervened. I had to meet with the vice principal. I had to meet with the teacher. Eventually, I had to meet with the principal. And let me just say the experience was less than pleasing for me. I felt a little dismissed. I felt unheard. I felt that, it was more like, who's this privileged kid asking for stuff? It just left a really sad taste in my mouth. So when I saw the announcement in December with Superintendent Wright saying that there will be an election, and I actually met the superintendent in one of the meet and greets at Matthew Turner, I said, you know what, maybe I should run. I've had this life experience. I've had this concern where I believe that we need a little more advocacy, not just for kids like mine, but just any kid. I just imagined, gosh, if I'm having so much trouble with my education and my background, what chance would I have had if I didn't have this education and background to get anywhere with the school? It was almost as if I was asking the school to give me their firstborn. All I wanted was for her to drop the class or change a class. That's all. Eventually they did that, but it was, I think, with a lot of difficulty. And she's doing better, but she suffered terribly. Her mental health went down the hill. And I don't want anybody else's child to go through that. My child, I hadn't heard her cry since the 4th grade. She was crying constantly every night during last semester. We had a miserable Thanksgiving, miserable Christmas. We're just beginning to recover this semester, slowly, slowly. Let me say this: it's difficult to be a teenager already and then being pushed. So for me, advocacy is a big deal. I'd like people to have an advocate in our district, no matter whether you have a child with special needs or whether you have an advanced child who takes a bunch of AP classes. All children should have an advocate. And this brings my second point, is mental illness. I think is something that we should address more in our schools. We have a high incidence of suicide, depression, anxiety among our kids. This is not acceptable. We're pushing our kids kind of like the Energizer Bunny these days, almost like we're trying to dope them up with more caffeine and stimulants so they can keep going. There were many nights when my daughter, go ahead. Sorry. There were many nights when she was working on one of her classes, and I noticed multiple kids up at 3 a.m. still doing work. I don't find that healthy and good. I don't like the idea of having early bird classes. I think kids should get their sleep. And I think we should have more mental health access during the school hours, because these kids are there. It was so difficult for me to get therapy for my daughter. I have to pull her out of class. And imagine other people who don't even have the resources, what they're going through. I think some other ideas that we can have is maybe, we have about 22% who are socioeconomically disadvantaged in our schools, and I suspect some of them are Medi-Cal beneficiaries. Maybe we can incorporate some Medi-Cal programs to maybe do telehealth within the school hours with some of the kids who need the therapy. And as I kept, and this feeds the one more issue that I've heard that it's a lot of concern for a lot of people, is safety. I think if we address mental health early on, if we address kids who are at risk for maybe resorting to unhealthy choices, then we may be able to avert some of the things that we are seeing. What I'd like to see is more prevention, more of addressing these things, and also maybe building a community of trust within the school system. One thing I noticed within the high school, just my own general impression, talking to some kids, there seems to be in the teaching these days more evaluation. Like everything's about trying to do metrics and trying to measure kids and labeling them. And then secondly, it's about policing, making sure they're not cheating. And then thirdly, there's teaching. It seems like teaching's taking a backstage to those things. And I'd like to get back to the idea of teaching first. Maybe we should start teaching to proficiency and mastery rather than focusing on grades and stressing the heck out of these kids. We're almost becoming like these schools in the South Bay and the Silicon Valley, where I've actually personally heard of suicides in those schools. Even if you lose one, that is horrible. That is just unacceptable. And the last thing that I noticed as I went along this, and forgive me, I may be going too long, is I noticed that our math scores are not particularly good. We pride ourselves of being a high-level high school. If you look at the SARC report, this isn't me making up, this is the SARC report. It was 36% of our students at the 11th grade level are proficient in mathematics. The state average is 33. But let's compare it to where we are with our elementary kids. Our elementary kids, on average, 55% are proficient in mathematics between the schools. It ranges from 45 to 65 among the different schools. And then if we talk about equity in that department, 12% of African American kids are proficient in mathematics. There we have 16 African Americans, only 2 showed proficiency. Hispanic kids, 15 out of 71, 21%. So you say, well, could this be somehow correlated with socioeconomics? The disadvantaged kids in our school, the ones who are identified as socioeconomic disadvantaged, are about 29%. So the correlation is not there with socioeconomics. So we have to see what is it that we're doing in our schools for some of our other kids, that they're not achieving what they should. And I believe everyone should be achieving the same. I think we're all inherently talented, we're all inherently equal, and I think we all inherently should be doing the same if all circumstances and all judgments are equal among all of us. Now, if you also look conversely, you look at the Asian American students that are identified, 75% are achieving the standards for mathematics. There are studies, and again, I'm not making this up to be biased or anything. There are studies nationally where Asian American families are better off financially and they have greater access to greater resources, more resources. I don't know if we can interpolate that to our community. So I don't want to take a statement, but it's something to consider. So these are my three main issues: advocacy, mental health, and math and science education. And I think they all merge into the whole ideas of trying to have equitable outcomes, the ideas of trying to have everybody treated well. And
Okay.
so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one question, and then please put any other questions in the chat. And this question is from our mayor. Why didn't you sign up to run last November when you could have walked into the office without opposition?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Young. I will admit that I was socially irresponsible and I didn't pay attention because the problem hadn't hit me. It's like you think you have good health insurance until you get sick. Most people say, I love my health insurance. You get sick, you find out what your health insurance is. I thought I was moving along smoothly. I honest to goodness, I swear on whatever you want me to swear, I didn't even know that the school, that there was a missing, the ballot. I didn't even notice that we didn't have one in my area. There was like 20 judges that we had to vote on. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm a Democrat. I voted for you, Mayor, by the way, every time you've run for everything. When I saw the 20 judges, I wanted to make sure they're in agreement. So I spent most of my ballot time trying to study who appointed the judges to make sure I'm not appointing for some far right extremist, which I'm not in agreement with. So I take responsibility for not being awake enough at the time. My experience with my child woke me up a bit. It just happened to coincide with the events that have taken place since then.
Okay, we have one other question from Nathalie Christian. She said, I heard some folks on Facebook have been going after you for some things you said about critical race theory. I'm not on Facebook. Do you know what you said that that got this response, and how did you handle it?
I said nothing about actually critical race theory per se. I've had some people make comments. So I've had a couple of people write comments and asking me, what do you think of CRT and what do you think of drag queens in our schools? And I don't answer those because I suspect these are coming from Fox News. And I suspect these are the same people who think we have kitty litters in our schools because kids identify as cats. So let me just say this about CRT. I don't want to engage with these folks on Facebook, but what I would say is that CRT seems to be a buzzword that some folks are throwing around these days to prevent people from having certain ethnicities have their stories told. I'm reading a great book right now, and I urge anybody who wants to, Robert E. Lee and Me by Ty Sedgley. He's a brigadier general retired in the military. He's an West Point professor, retired. He writes about his experiences and how he was told a bunch of lies as he was growing up about the lost cause, the myth that plantations were somehow this wonderful place where the slaves were just happy as can be, and movies like Gone with the Wind being the greatest ever. And he learned, and he said, you know what, I was lied to. And as I got educated and I learned this is all a bunch of BS, and how horrible the experience of slavery and the experience of a lot of our ethnic minorities have been in our country. I grew up, I tell you, I think I mentioned this when I sent you my email. I went to high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I went to, there's the famous Gap band, GAP. I don't know if you remember the funk band from 70s. They came from my high school. The Gap, the G stands for Greenwood. My high school was 3 miles from Greenwood. Not once was I taught about the Greenwood Massacre in high school. Not once. I learned about Greenwood Massacre 14 years after I left high school. We had heard vaguely about some riots where some people rose up. So I think some of these folks are trying to, the same way that they did after Reconstruction, where they put all those monuments out in the South, commemorating the lost cause and the Confederates. They want to retell history, and they want to silence the history of others because, frankly, to borrow a word from Al Gore, it's an inconvenient truth. I just don't engage with these folks on Facebook just because, and I think they're trying, because you can't argue. It's just like a patient who tells me, I don't want to take the COVID vaccine, or I don't want, I don't argue with them anymore, because how can I argue with their wonderful sources that they believe as more authoritative than me? I just tell them, this is what I believe, and I wish you well in your beliefs. But I think
we've got a couple of other questions.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then we'll need to wrap it up. So how do your views or policies differ or are better than your two opponents? And then what is your experience implementing implementing mental health treatment programs? And if we could, first one about your policies or views. And go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I honestly don't know how my policies, I'm not running a comparative campaign. I'm not running, and honestly, nobody knows all of us well. We're all a bunch of unknowns around here. And I hear superlatives and comparatives, positive and negative, being bandied about. And I'm not trying to be comparative. You guys can look at you guys can look at my resume and who I am and decide, it's which institutions have given me the trust to do the job that they need to.
Okay, then let's one other question, which is, what is your experience implementing mental health treatment programs?
So
we'll try to wrap this up in about a minute or so.
Sure. The experience. I've been a direct provider of mental health myself as a physician. As far as programs, as part of Health Plan of San Joaquin, where I was medical director for 2 years, I was responsible for assuring mental health access for our members. We were trying to expand our network coverage within the Medi-Cal system. A lot of times we had to resort to some of the online and some of the commercial vendors to get that. It's very difficult to get mental health treatment. It's very difficult. The providers are limited, the access is limited. As far as implementing as a whole, as a policymaker, no, I haven't been governor. I haven't been a hospital administrator, but I have been involved in, I am cognizant of the challenges and how what it takes to get the right mental health for the right people at the right time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your coming. And if you wanted to put into the chat how people could reach you if they have other questions or would like to follow up with anything you say, if there's a way to contact you.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit disabled here. I'm just using a phone as far as the chat, but
okay.
I apologize. No, there's the Facebook page, and I'm not sure. You can give my email.
Okay.
I don't care. You can give my email to people here, and that's fine. That you have as well, and they can. And I'll be happy to make this for them.
We could just say check your Facebook page, and they would be able to contact you through that too.
Or if they want to send something to my email that you have, or to you and Natalie, and forward it to me, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has.